for today, Dr. Bob Stein, who serves as the president of the Palomar Rehabilitation Hospital. He is a member of the board of the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum. In addition, he is a key member of the American Heart Association San Diego chapter. Greetings to all. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, first of all, I want to welcome everyone to the first Zoom lecture of 2026. And I also want to thank Lily for her effusive introduction. And we're just dying to hear this wonderful talk on Tyrus Wong, an artist who lived to be 106, and we have all seen his work, even though we may not realize it. And you're going to find that out from Karen's talk. And we want to mention first the upcoming speakers. So let's have the next slide, please. And we've got our own Lily Birmingham, who's going to be a discussant today, and she's going to talk about Chinese woodblocks. And if you look at her picture, you'll notice that she's sitting in a room with a Chinese woodblock over her shoulder, and that's going to be lots of fun. And I have two Japanese woodblocks over my shoulder, and they've been here for all the years I've been doing these moderating of the Zooms. And in March, we're going to have an annual talk about the first president of China, of modern post-dynastic China, Dr. Sun Yat-sen. And we're going to have Busaba Yip, who is the head of a museum in Honolulu, about Dr. Sun. And we're going to have Dr. Sun's great-grandson, Leland Sun, talk, who I just love talking to. He's a very cool guy. He was an actor himself and was in a bunch of MASH episodes. And that's going to be fun. You wouldn't want to miss that. And we're going to have new stuff, new discussions about Dr. Sun. And next, we're going to have Lily Birmingham talk about upcoming events at the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum. Lily? Uh-oh. Lily? Well,
hello.
Lily, there you are. I was about to do this myself, but there you are. So go right ahead.
So our current special exhibition is about World War II, China, Burma, India theater. It's very popular, and it will end in the end of February. If you have not seen it, please stop by. And tomorrow we have this annual food tour in our Convoy Street area, and it requires registration. If you'd like to join, it's not too late yet. And February 1st is our monthly Asian Pacific Historic District walking tour, also requires registration online. And then February 7th, we have a Chinese love story telling in our garden. February 28th to March 1st is our annual Chinese New Year Street Fair right in front of our museum. Very, very popular. So please come and join us. And then March 3rd, we will restart our docent training program. If you like to be a docent, please join us, register. Even if you don't want to be a docent, just want to learn more as a volunteer, you're welcome. Our March presentations are all virtual, so you could review at home. And then April, we will have some in-person in-gallery practices. So hope you will join us and register.
Oh, thank you very much. And now we hope we're going to have Carolyn Chin speaking to us from a train on the way up towards the LA area. She is the ambassador from the San Diego State University Chinese Cultural Center. And Carolyn?
Thank you, Bob. Happy New Year, everyone. So the first event we have currently at the Chinese Culture Center is the Silk on Silk exhibit, and it will last until March 2026. I apologize of the announcement on the train. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
You're great.
This exhibit will discover the timeless beauty and cultural legacy of Chinese silk. And then, of course, following up in February, we will have the Lunar New Year celebration at the Chinese Culture Center. It will be on February the 17th. And the program includes some Chinese paper cutting, some calligraphy craft, and of course, Chinese music. Last but not the least is to introduce the San Diego Junior Theater will present a musical adaptation of Where the Mountain Meets the Moon. So please join us for that. Back to you, Bob.
Well, thank you very much. And we want to thank our sponsors, the PL Charitable Trust and the Shu family, without whose generosity we wouldn't be able to put this on. And we would also like at this point to mention some guidelines, if we could have the next slide. First of all, I want to point out the subtitles. We have a software program that generates Chinese characters from our English words, and my Chinese-speaking friends tell me it's pretty accurate, apart from when one of us attempts to say something in Chinese, which befuddles the software. But beyond that, it's pretty good. And I also want to remind you that this is being put on by San Diego State University Chinese Cultural Center and the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum. And I also want to tell you that we are going to have a group picture, and I'm going to turn things over to Kathy, who is a senior at Canyon Crest High School and is one of our volunteers. And she's going to take our group picture. So, Kathy?
Thank you, Bob. Please turn your cameras on, everyone, and then I'll count down. 3, 2, 1. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Very cool. Okay, so at this point, I want to mention one other thing about questions. If you have questions, remember them, and at the end, you'll raise your hand and ask, or you can type them into the chat box. And Kathy will, in fact, be reviewing the chat box throughout the talk. And when we're all finished, I'll be asking her about questions generated through the talk, and we'll get to you. So that'll be a lot of fun. And right now I want to tell you a little bit about Karen, who is a professor of English at the University of Houston. And she is a film scholar and visual culture critic who writes and speaks for museums and film festivals worldwide, focusing on the intersection of Eastern and Western aesthetics. And she's written books on Hong Kong cinema, 19th century British fascination with exotica. And she has contributed to major publications, as you can see, and she's been a contributor to NPR radio series, The Engines of Our Ingenuity. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that background artist has already won. It's just recently been released. It's already won 2 awards. Finalist for the Chinese American Librarians Association Best Book Award for Adult Nonfiction, and also Theater Library Association Richard Wall Memorial Award for Scholarship in Media and Recorded Performance. And Lily Birmingham is going to be discussant. Lily is now celebrating her 50th year in the United States, having been born in Taiwan, and she's an experienced museum docent who graduated from San Diego Museum of Art Docent Training Program in 2013, and she was in fact one of my teachers, and she retired in 2011. She's now a museum docent there, as well as San Diego Chinese Historical Museum, and a board member since 2019. So with that as a little bit of background, let's have Karen begin. So we're so happy to have you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Bob and Lily and Muting and Caroline, everyone who made the invitation and made this event possible. Before I start talking, I would love for us to begin by looking at a recent news piece that was based on my book. So if you could roll that, please, Muting.
One of the most famous and beloved films in history was almost never made. It posed a particular challenge, and the filmmakers had seemingly given up. But one man had an idea to save it. He could see things that others couldn't. You likely wouldn't recognize his name. He never got the recognition he deserved. But he is one of the great immigrant success stories who saved an American icon.
With a smile and a song, life is just like a bright sunny day or day.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is a hit at the box office in 1938. No one had ever seen anything like it. It's a tough act to follow, even for Walt Disney.
It was hard enough with Snow White to convincingly animate human figures, to invest drawn characters with enough emotion and personality that you cared about them for the duration of a feature film. And now you're going to do this with animals?
Disney's next act...
Don't you remember me?
Bambi.
Why, it's the young prince, Bambi.
But it's not working. One member of the crew has an idea. He's not a high-level filmmaker, but he is an accomplished artist who is hired to be one of the many who paints all the cells needed to bring animated figures to life.
This is the color palette that we're working with. This is the mood or the weather, that we're imagining.
Walt Disney is impressed. No easy task. And American icons Disney and Bambi are saved by a Chinese immigrant.
So let's get together and sing what it knows.
You show up for your friends, you show up for your family, you show up when it matters.
A camera captures life. A paintbrush creates it. With a palette, the creative possibilities are endless.
Some people have described my art sort of as stained glass with watercolor.
Tony Moy is a self-taught comic book artist. The tools may look similar from one artist to the next, but Tony says one important element of his work is his culture.
I kind of end up combining bits of my own Asian heritage and philosophy about having those quiet moments, especially when I'm doing my comics, focusing on the environment instead of just the action.
That's exactly the artistic lesson of Tyrus Wong. At the age of 10, he arrives in San Francisco from China in 1920. He has a talent for calligraphy.
At this very early age, Tyrus developed this mastery with the brush. And I think that served a lot of purposes in his father's eyes, right? It kept his son connected to Chinese culture. It kept his son out of trouble.
Karen Fang is a professor at the University of Houston. She says Wong develops into a significant artist. At age 22, his work is on display at Chicago's Art Institute with Matisse and Picasso.
Everyone has already been pointing to him as a rising young artist. And so at least one or two of his fine art prints make it into that exhibit.
Making a living as an artist is still a challenge, especially when you have a family. He takes a job at Disney and sees the problem artists are having with making Bambi and friends come to life.
He sort of figures maybe what Bambi needs is a little bit more of an evocative background, something like the kinds of evocative landscapes that you see in Chinese art.
In Snow White, the backgrounds are very realistic. But in nature, animals evolve with features that allow them to seemingly disappear in their environment. Camouflage is a survival trait, but it becomes a problem when an animal is supposed to be the star of the show.
If you can still create the feeling of the forest without painting every leaf and tree, there's animals that they had worked so hard, to develop and that are so central to the story because you have to care about those animals, right? Those animals can sort of stand out, that you can follow them and they can win your hearts and everything.
He stopped and looked at me.
Yes, I know.
Why was everyone stale when he came on the meadow?
Bambi is not an immediate box office smash, but eventually becomes one of the most beloved films thanks to Wong's insight about the background. The name of Fang's book, Background Artist.
A background artist as a metaphor for an immigrant, I think, is perfect because it really captures the ways that they contribute to and enrich our lives, and a way in which we need to sort of, look into the background to see
what we're gaining from them.
Because of the Chinese Exclusion Act, Wong can't even become a citizen.
There's always been in American history this fundamental contradiction between this appreciation for Asian aesthetics and a distaste for the Chinese body or Chinese community.
Wong inspires future artists like Tony Moy.
Looking at how he saw lights and created action and movement is inspiring, especially when I do comics, right? You're taking a still shot in a panel and you're trying to make it dynamic.
His latest comic addresses a chapter of history that reveals heroism and discrimination. The 442nd Battalion includes 10,000 Japanese Americans who fight for America in Italy and France.
And became the most decorated unit. And many of them were fighting while their families or they themselves came from the internment camps.
They earn 18,000 medals. They rescue 200 Texas soldiers behind enemy lines and are among the first soldiers to liberate Dachau concentration camp.
So if you look at sort of the historical irony on that, your family might be behind barbed wire at home in the internment camps, and you're liberating a version of those camps in Europe.
Most of these Japanese American artists are then interned. Their careers are, irrevocably hampered in some way. Many of them are never able to recover from that.
Drinking warm water before bed improves eyesight almost overnight. Thousands of people are already doing this.
My name is Frank McLeod. I'm about 12 miles off Boot Key Harbor on my way in.
Wong moves from Disney to Warner Brothers, helping make major motion pictures like Key Largo and Rebel Without a Cause.
During that time when he's first hired, of course, he worked on a bunch of war films, which he loved doing, and also a bunch of Westerns. He loved John Wayne movies, he initially starts working for John Wayne.
On the side, he's painting art for Christmas cards.
Here's this former alien excluded from citizenship, essentially a paper son, living under a sort of doctored identity, and he's making these patently, hybrid fusion-style cards where it's, Christian imagery presented with, Chinese style brushwork. That's a huge achievement and even more meaningful for somebody who, belongs to a community that for so many decades, America was trying to marginalize.
He even gets fan mail. In the golden age of Christmas cards, he becomes known as America's favorite Christmas card designer. Credited as a background artist, he never gets much of the credit with Disney, but in 2001, Disney finally recognizes him as a legend for saving Bambi. In 1968, he retires at the age of 59. Wong says he's all painted out, but still has an interest in creating. He builds kites, infusing Western and Asian styles.
He says, I used to go fishing a lot, but with fishing, you look down. Now I do kites, because with kites, you always look up. And I think that really distills Tyrus's view in the world, right? That, whatever the world throws at you, you should always just focus on transcendence.
Tyrus Wong dies in 2016 at the age of 106.
All immigrants are background artists, but immigrant artists like Tyrus Wong are particularly fascinating, both for how their work enriches our world and how they refuse to stay in the background. As with his work for Bambi, Tyrus was always simply an artist.
Thank you so much for letting me share that with you. I'm so grateful to have that news story, which just came out a few months ago, because it also gives you a nice arc. It gives you the sort of arc, the highlights of the best known parts of Tyrus's story. And, over the past year, as I've been touring and giving book talks, I like to be able to, shape my book talks for different audiences. And so since we have we've already, and I know many of you already know a little bit about Tyrus as well, I want to take the opportunity today to focus on one lesser known specific chapter in Tyrus's life for a biography, and it's one that has a San Diego and San Diego Chinese connection. So I will say, just to reiterate what Bob said, we have a really full program today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and Catherine will be keeping an eye on those as well. So next slide, please, Meeting. Next slide, please. So the story that I'll be sharing with you today begins in 1931, which is 7 years before Tyrus joins Disney. At that time, Tyrus is a popular, respected art student at the Otis Art Institute in Los Angeles. That's the school on the left. It was actually in the mansion of Harrison Gray Otis, who, one time editor of the LA Times and prominent Angelino in real estate. He had, as we know, he had arrived in the U.S. as a young boy, around 9 or 10 years old. So he's already been in the U.S. for 10 years at this point. He still has his accent, but he's highly assimilated and very well regarded by teachers and fellow students at Otis. And so you can see Tyrus in the picture on the right. That's Tyrus and some classmates on the Otis front lawn. And that's Tyrus right there in the middle, the only non-white in that set of classrooms. And so it shows, how unusual he was, but also how accepted he was by his fellow art students. Next slide, please. So Tyrus was attending Otis on scholarship, which is an indicator of his artistic talent already being evident. He was very, very soon into his time at Otis. He was winning awards. And after graduation in 1932, he immediately starts getting some great reviews in the LA Times. And so you can see here this gifted young Chinese artist, the poetic etcher of Chinatown, who gives a Chinese twist to a Michelangelo figure. From one exhibit in 1934, Tyrus was the youngest, but perhaps the most extraordinary. In 1935, someone describes him as his work as fine as many of the Chinese old masters which inspired him. So Tyrus is really, from a very young age, showing incredible promise. Next slide, please. In fact, Tyrus was so promising as an art student that his instructors at Otis often recommended him for special jobs or commissions. And so in this photo here, I don't know if you can, if you look sort of to the right side of the road, there's a billboard that's jutting out perpendicular to the street, to the buildings. And it says, if you look closely, Her Secret Brasiers, with some white etchings of lingerie on a black background. This is actually one of Tyrus's first commissions that he's directed to by his faculty at Otis. This was around 1929, maybe. Tyrus is still a teenager. He presumably doesn't know that much about bras, but really most everybody in the US did not know much about bras. The brasier was then a new invention from France, had just been imported, which is exactly why this lingerie dealer on Hollywood Boulevard wanted an artist to paint some pictures to display it. And one of the things I love about being able to do these longer talks is the chance to share with you some images that I wasn't able to squeeze into my book. And so this is a wonderful vintage photo that Kim Wong, Tyrus's youngest daughter, only discovered literally as I was sending the book to the printer. And so it's, she and I and Pamela Tom, the filmmaker, had all been looking for this for years. So it's always fun to share these images with you. But all of this is just to say that even from a very young age, Tyrus was already an unusual, exceptional immigrant. Remember, this is still the era of Chinese exclusion. Most Chinese are restricted to working in shops or restaurants or laundries. They're essentially reduced to manual labor, right? That was the purpose of exclusion, right? Tyrus is working with his hands, but he's working with his hands differently. Art is going to make possible a future for him that's not available to most Chinese at that time. And he's able to do this despite very humble origins that probably are similar to perhaps some of the people, to the family history of some of the people who are listening today. Next slide, please. So how humble, like Tyrus, during that like many people during that time, Tyrus endured the difficulties of exclusion. He had essentially a paper identity, although he came with his biological father. He and his father were both using acquired names. In coming to the US, Tyrus left behind his mother and his sister. Tyrus would never see his mother again. And when he comes as a young boy, Tyrus is detained in Angel Island. He ends up staying in Angel Island for a month, which was standard at that time. But unfortunately, he was also the only child there at that time, which wasn't uncommon because, as you know, it was very difficult for for children to immigrate. However, at the same time, we know Tyrus had some advantages. Next slide, please. So coming around 9 or 10 years old, Tyrus was young. And so obviously when you come as a youngster, right, your ability to adapt and to assimilate usually, I think, is greater. Tyrus had a very experienced father. So although his father was, like most Chinese, restricted to manual labor, his father was literate. His father was the one who first teaches Tyrus calligraphy. His father quoted Chinese poetry to Tyrus. Tyrus's father also had gone back and forth between the US and China at least twice. And so he was very experienced. He had lived in the US for 20 years before he brought his son Tyrus to the US. And so he's very experienced with exclusion law. And Tyrus's father had also spent some time in Angel Island. And so he was very prepared for the situation when Tyrus was going to come. And third and most important, next slide, in Tyrus's advantages was obviously his artistic ability. And so you see here, this is an image of what I call the matchstick orchestra. It's a sort of a diorama of an orchestra that Tyrus makes when he's only in the 7th grade, just a few years after he arrives in the US. You can see if you look closely, all of those little figurines are bent up matchsticks with little pieces of construction paper that have been cut out or colored, right, to create, the brass and the wind section, the conductor in the middle, the strings. It's just a sort of wonderful example of a prodigious and precocious artistic ability. This artistic ability was already evident in Tyrus when he was a child in China. I mentioned in my book a story about he was never a great student. And so even when he was at school in China, he would, sort of drift off, not pay attention. But once his instructor in China was, trying to show the similarity between the characters and the things that the word is supposed to represent. So he's talking about law for radish, and he draws the character law for radish. And Tyrus immediately draws a much more accurate picture of a radish. So, everyone knew this about Tyrus, that he was unusually gifted at drawing and sketching, even with no training. And so when he comes to the US and he's first enrolled at the McKinley School of Sacramento, it becomes obvious to the teachers as well. And so the teachers are the ones who first start suggesting, maybe you can grow up to become a sign painter. And certainly what he's doing as a youngster in school is he starts by just making sort of posters in the hallways, posters for the school dance, for fire safety, things like that. But this brings us back to 1931 and where we started our story. And Tyrus as this promising young art student in 1931 with a significant, he's attending school on scholarship. It might have been all of these opportunities that art had brought him, his confidence in his artistic talent, why Tyrus mistakenly thought that exclusion was behind him. Next, and he thinks that he's safe to go on a sketching trip across the border to Tijuana. Next slide, please. So a little bit about sketching trips. Sketching trips or plein air painting or plein air sketching, sort of drawing or painting outdoors, not in a studio, by looking at things in the real world is a very important part of artistic training. Often for people in art school when they're young, or even whatever age you are as an artist, it's often a form of social connection. When you're all painting individually, but you're all looking at the same thing, you all go out together. It's a very possible. It's a very popular social activity for artists. So if you look in that image on the left, that is not a surfboard. that the person is holding. It's actually a sketch book that the figure is holding and chasing after the bus, presumably that's leaving with his friends. That's an image from Palette Scrapings, which was the school newspaper from Otis. And so in 1931, when Tyrus and his friends decide to go across the border to Tijuana for a sketching trip, why did they pick Tijuana? Next slide. So Tijuana, was then famous for the Agua Caliente Hotel had just opened. It was a favorite haunt of Hollywood stars, mobsters, politicians, billionaires. It was also very popular with painters and artists. So, a bit later in the 30s, the Mexican muralists like Diego Rivera are going to become very influential in the United States. So obviously, that movement across the northward movement across the border from Mexico to the U.S. happens at Southern California. So the Southern California artists are really on the leading edge on the sort of aesthetic inspiration that Mexico provides. And so obviously Tyrus and his fellow art students, in Southern California are there as well. So next slide, please. And so it is on October 31st, 1931, Halloween Day, that one of Tyrus's buddies in art school, Burr Bush, that's the tall gentleman with the Stetson in the upper right, and his wife and daughter, shown there as well, invite Tyrus to join them for the day to go to San Diego, go through San Diego to Tijuana for a sketching trip. And they're going to cross at San Ysidro. They were going to spend about 2 hours in Tijuana, and then they're going to come back and sketch in San Diego as well. However, next slide. Tyrus is on their return. Tyrus is stopped at the border because he had forgotten to file his reentry permit. So some of you may know, right? In exclusion, all aliens ineligible for citizenship were, like Tyrus, were required to carry ID with them at all times. If they wanted to leave the U.S. with the intent to return, they had to file a pre-registration form. Often, and simply filing the pre-registration form was not enough. You often had to acquire multiple depositions from witnesses attesting to your legitimacy, and usually often you had to seek white witnesses. So Tyrus's father knew this well. Tyrus's father had done this twice before when he had left the U.S. and come back. But Tyrus is, he's a 21-year-old kid and student. We all know it. He's pretty happy-go-lucky. He just plain forgets to do that. And so when he tries to return to the U.S. from Tijuana at San Ysidro, he's stopped by the border agents. Now, I know that last year you guys had a talk from my friend Katie G. Salisbury, who has a new biography on Anna May Wong, and she describes a similar situation happening with Anna May Wong, the movie star, that she had forgot that Anna May Wong was lacking her Form 430, the requisite document. Now, and remember, Anna May Wong, she had crossed the border to Canada for a film shoot, and then and yet she's also a U.S. citizen. She was born in the U.S. She was born on Flower Street in Los Angeles. Yeah, and yet she also is stopped at the border, and it takes a bit of time for that to be clarified for her to get in. And she's a big movie star. It's obviously much worse for someone like Tyrus, a non-citizen, and who, although is a promising rising young artist, has nothing like the connections or the influence or visibility of Anna May Wong. So, obviously, I don't need to explain, I think, to any of you listening today, many of you who are like me, are children or families of immigrants, of the significance of the crisis that this moment must have felt like for Tyrus, right? If he's not allowed to re-enter the U.S., this is going to mean the loss of everything his father had worked for, everything both his parents had sacrificed, right? It's also going to mean a loss of all of this new community, the connections, and this promise that he seems on the cusp of acquiring or building, just as he's, having as a scholarship student in art school and so close to graduation. And this is all because he's forgotten to have with him to file the proper documents. And so very poignantly, the immigration documents surrounding his denial say that he has, quote unquote, no paper at all. And of course, this is so ironic because he's an art student who had gone across the border for a sketching trip. So he's got lots of paper. It's just not the right kind of paper. Next slide, please. So what does where's the first place a good Chinese boy goes when he is new in town? Next slide. Why? He goes to a Chinese restaurant, of course. And this is a joke that I heard in the course of my research into Tyrus's life. I heard this as a joke that was sort of told about this story later on. And so Tyrus gets when he's denied reentry, and actually his friends don't just give up on him. And so when they're denied at San Ysidro, his friend Burr Bush actually drives him on to Mexicali as well. And they say, let's go try this other border entry. And they're actually stopped at Mexicali. And so as well. And so then Burr drives Tyrus back to San Ysidro, and Tyrus says, why don't you go on ahead and get help, tell them what's happened, and I'll just have to figure out things from here. And so Tyrus stays in Tijuana, and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know anyone in Tijuana. What does he do? He goes to the first Chinese restaurant, or he goes to a Chinese restaurant. He finds it. He goes to the New San Diego Cafe. The New San Diego Cafe is owned by Luis Ma Fong. Next slide. Next slide, please. Luis Ma Fong was the patriarch of one of the first 6 Chinese families in Tijuana. He may possibly be the very first ethnic Chinese to be naturalized in Mexico. Next slide. Next slide. Ma Fong was quite the successful businessman. In addition to the New San Diego Cafe, he also owned the Mona Lisa nightclub. You can see the Mona Lisa here on Tijuana's main drag. Next slide. He also ran a boarding house for the number of the many Chinese men who were coming in through Tijuana, either on their way to the US or to stay in Mexico, like Ma Fong did. This is Ma Fong and his family. I'm not sure if they're in front of the family house or in front of the boarding house, but this photo is from a little bit later in the 30s. But so Ma Fong Tyrus is very smart to go to the Chinese restaurant and get connected with Ma Fong, because Ma Fong clearly is equipped and interested in helping other Chinese like him. You know, remember, most of the Chinese who were coming into North America at this time were all coming from the same area of Guangdong. Next slide. Now, when Tyrus is denied, he's given the opportunity to appeal for reentry. And the process to appeal for reentry, as you can imagine, is not fast or easy. And so, you know, while Tyrus is in Tijuana, his friend Burr Bush drives back to LA. He tells the school somehow Tyrus's father in Chinatown is also notified as well. The school immediately telegrams down to the U.S. Border Office to confirm Tyrus's identity. They send the proper papers. You know, they send a testimonial, you know, regarding his promise as a student and how everybody would like to have him. You know, the record of his father's family. But you know, this is sort of like just sort of kept or ignored, or it arrives, and has a first interview about 2 days later, and he's immediately denied. And then, but he's allowed to reappeal after that. And for the next appeal interview, he's told it's scheduled for 4 weeks later. So he basically has to stay in Tijuana for a month, which is not convenient, but it does allow Tyrus and his friends, i.e. Otis and his father, to gather to mount to their defense. And just to explain this cartoon that you see in front of you, this cartoon is by Mark Davis, who was one of the Disney Nine Old Men, but had also Mark had helped animate Thumper and Flower, famously from Bambi. But Mark was actually one of the many future Disney people that Tyrus knew as a fellow art student. Mark and Tyrus had been together in life drawing class in I think 1930 or something. And so when Tyrus turned 70 in 1980, the family threw him a surprise birthday party, and they asked friends to, send little memories of Tyrus. And this is what Mark sent. Is this drawing? Memorable experiences. Well, why the first time I heard of Tyrus, he was jailed in Tijuana. And so I think this is a sort of just a reminder of how significant the Tijuana episode was in Tyrus's life, and how it continued to loom over his memory or his life experiences. Next slide. So what did Tyrus do while stranded in Tijuana, right? Remember, he's got 4 weeks until his next reentry interview. Well, obviously he would have needed money, because, he had only intended to go to Tijuana for the day, right? So he certainly is not equipped to, fund himself for a month. So he would have had to earn money. So presumably, I would imagine that he probably went to work for Louis Maffong in either the restaurant or the cafe. And so for those of you who know Lisa C's, really classic work of Chinese American history, her family memoir on Gold Mountain, the Dragon's Den restaurant looms significant. It was founded by Lisa C's grandfather, Eddie C. Eddie C. was actually Tyrus's good friend. And Tyrus actually helped design the mural, the external mural that you see here on the photograph on the right. And in the middle is one of the many menu covers that Tyrus hand painted. Tyrus hand painted individual menu covers for all of the Dragon's Den menus. So I just provide these as illustrations of Tyrus's future relationship to a restaurant, but also as a suggestion of what Tyrus was doing while he was in Tijuana. Next slide. Tyrus, of course, probably whiled away the time sketching, right? I mean, he is an artist. That's what he came to Tijuana to do. And what artist is always sketching. So I imagine whenever he had downtime, he continued to sketch. Next slide. Next slide. I also like to think that Tyrus spent the time making toys for the Maffong. Oh, sorry, go back. Yes, stay there, please. For the Maffong daughter. So the image on the right, if you're familiar with the catalog from the retrospective at the very end of Tyrus's life, you know that towards his later years, Tyrus used to make these little decorative toys for his daughters out of found material. So you can see these wonderful pigs made from pillboxes, which is a sort of another insight, I think, into the kind of artist that Tyrus was. That he wasn't, he saw every kind of medium, every kind of material as an opportunity for beauty or for charm or for whimsy, right? And so that he would he could turn like the matchsticks into an orchestra. He could turn pillboxes into these cute little pigs, So I would imagine that, Tyrus was always very friendly, that maybe he spent some time in Tijuana really getting to know the Maffong family, maybe making toys for the Maffong daughter. They had one daughter at the time that he was there. Next slide. Next slide. Tyrus also made friends with the Border Patrol. I said Tyrus, really likable guy. He's very funny. I tell in the book that at one point, one of the Border Patrol guys says to Tyrus, hey, why don't you just kind of go over there? I'm going to look the other way. You can go ahead and hop the fence. But, Tyrus knows that, exclusion law is very strict. He doesn't want to endanger his his right to be there as a student under, so he respectfully declines and says, and I'm going to wait for my reentry interview. So he ends up staying 1 month in Tijuana, which is ironically basically the same amount of time that he spent in Angel Island. He does eventually get out. He does eventually successfully pass gain permission, and he gains permission. Next slide, please. With the help of Y.C. Hong, a leading immigration attorney and prominent Angelino and Chinatown booster and real estate investor. I don't know if the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum has already done a talk on YC Hung. If you haven't, you really should, because he's so important in Southern California and immigration, Chinese American history, that we don't have time to go into all the important things that fascinating things of YC's story. But you can see that what YC does is just sort of put in legal terms this reminder to the border authorities that Tyrus is a student, and remember, a student under exclusion law is one of the authorized classes to be here. And so it's eventually the intervention of YC Hong's legal expertise, which is sort of eventually forces the Border Patrol, forces the hand, and Tyrus is eventually allowed to re-enter to great relief back to the U.S. Next slide. So the Tijuana chapter is only, the Tijuana history that I'm describing here is only one chapter in Tyrus's long life. And I mean that literally. It's only one of the 28 chapters in my book. Now, obviously, when someone lives to 106 years and he works across so many different media and different industries and art forms, it's hard to tell that life story. You wouldn't do justice to that life story if you crammed it all together. But I was so excited to talk with you today because it allows me to really delve into the Tijuana San Diego connection, because it's not so well known, because there are so many other fascinating things about Tyrus's life. And I think it's worth dwelling on the Tijuana San Diego connections, because in some ways Tyrus can seem like such an exceptional person. He's an extraordinary artist with precocious abilities from a very young age. But it's important to remember that because of exclusion, he was vulnerable, like all Chinese were under exclusion. Even, we said already, even a famous movie star like Anna May Wong could be subject to the same kind of border mishap. So I'll wind up this talk about the sort of my focus on the Tijuana San Diego connections with just a few more little facts about Tyrus's sort of relationship with Chinese American history. And this is via the Presbyterian Mission Home. Next slide. The Presbyterian Mission Home in San Francisco, Chinatown, which is better known today as Cameron House. And Tyrus is connected to Cameron House via his wife, Ruth. Next slide. So Tyrus marries Ruth in 1937. Ruth is the daughter of Chin Mui. That's Chin Mui that you see on the far right in the wedding picture. And Ruth was a graduate of one of the very first classes of the mission home. So long before even Donaldine Cameron's era, Chin Mui was one of the earliest girls to arrive when it's still under the directorship of Margaret Culbertson. Some of her this early class of mission home girls included very prominent figures in Chinese American history, including Chen Fa, who is the wife of Ng Poon Chu, the editor and founder of the Chung Sayat Po, the Chinese language paper. It includes Tai Liang, the first Chinese American female officer in the Border Patrol. Ai Yan, who was the mother of Dr. Mom Chung, the first Chinese American female physician and also prominent war booster. Yet another classmate of these prominent women is, I'm sorry, I should have said a moment ago, next slide. So here are some of the earliest class. This is one of the first classes of the Chinese, of the mission home girls. And yet another alumna or graduate or classmate of these girls is, next slide, Su Liang. And Su Liang, many of you may know, will go on to marry, next slide, Quinn, the mayor of San Diego Chinatown, and now recognized today as one of San Diego's founding fathers. Now, I know all of you here probably maybe know much more about Quinn than I do, and what I know, I like you, I've learned from Susie Lancaster and particularly Cindy Sue. And Cindy Sue, importantly, is the granddaughter on her mother's side of Louise Ma Fong, as well as the great-granddaughter on her father's side of Ah Quin. Now, of course, the Ma Fong and Ah Quin families were not yet connected at the time of Tyrus's stay in Tijuana in 1931. Cindy Sue and I don't know if Cindy's on today, but I'm so indebted to Susie and to Cindy for all of their help in helping me understand the Ah Quin and Ma Fong family histories. Cindy and I only figured out Tyrus's tangential but double connections to the mission home when I reached out to her to learn about the Ma Fong family history. But Tijuana is such a memorable part of Tyrus's history, and Tyrus is such a beloved and important figure among the San Diego and Southern California Chinese that even though the Ma Fong families had long since lost touch by the time of Tyrus's 70th birthday party in 1980, that at least one member of the Ma Fong family actually made it to that party. Next slide. So this is Rose Ma Fong, who is Cindy's aunt and is the baby in the Ma Fong family photo that I showed you early. So Rose wasn't even born at the time that Tyrus was got to know the Ma Fong family in Tijuana in 1931. But over the years, she had heard so much about Tyrus, and like Cindy's mother, Maria, had moved to San Diego for school and then for marriage, and was living in San Diego, and somehow through the greater Chinese American community in San Diego, heard about Tyrus's 70th birthday surprise party, and so shows up for his party and surprises him with a sombrero, as you see in that photo. So just in summary, there are so many things, as you can see from the first story, and I know that Lily's going to be talking about as well, in Tyrus's life and his career and all of his wonderful art. But for obvious reasons, today I wanted to focus on this fascinating chapter in Tyrus's life in Tijuana and these connections to the San Diego Chinese community. Tyrus's extraordinary life is part of Chinese American and American heritage, not only in his extraordinary contributions in art, the way that he brought Chinese aesthetics into American heritage, and the hand that he had in so much of American culture. But I also think Tyrus's life is also important the way so many of our families' lives are, because of the ways that Chinese American heritage intersect with American history in general. Thank you.
Well, that was actually a wonderful talk, and we all thank you. And the cool thing is that it's a little side issue, as you mentioned, one chapter in your book. I have to point out that if people are interested, background artist, you can purchase it on Amazon for $29 and change, and it's it'd be a cool addition to your library. I also want to point out you were emphasizing this chapter about the Chinese Exclusion Act, and the amendment that prevented people from returning if they didn't have the right paperwork when they left the country was written very specifically for that exact purpose, just so as to keep people out. Another way to reduce the Chinese population in the United States. It was pure racism. And then you might say, well, when did all this end? Millions of Americans owe their presence in this country to Lyndon Johnson, who signed the Immigration Act of 1965, written by Emanuel Seller, the congressman from Queens and Brooklyn, who joined Congress in 1924, exactly when the Congress passed the 1924 Immigration Act that kept out everybody. They said, let's use the Chinese Exclusion Act as a model. We'll keep out everybody. And he said, I hope I live long enough, and I hope I stay in Congress long enough. And one day, if the country's mood is right, I'm going to write legislature that will reverse all this. And he waited 1965. It was 40 years later, plus, and he wrote the legislation that he was waiting waiting to write for 40 years. It's amazing. So in any event, I just thought I'd mention all that. And right now, we're going to have Lily Birmingham, who's going to talk a little bit more about Tyrus Wong's art. He did all sorts of stuff. He did movies, background for animated works. He was an artist in his own right, doing landscapes. He just was remarkably versatile and active. So, Lily, we're happy to have you speak now.
Thank you. Okay, Muting has my slide. Please put in the slideshow. Okay, thank you. As a docent, I want to share some of these pictures, paintings from Tyrus Wong and make you look through quickly, but a little more. Next. Here are his early paintings, self-portrait and Chinese Jesus. They were from his student days or shortly after that. And you can see all the lines are really soft and gentle, and the colors are muted. And we see this self-absorbed artist sitting there thinking and maybe trying to decide what to draw on his board there. And even the Jesus, Chinese Jesus, is blended to the background. So it kind of tells us he has always been a background type of person. He doesn't want to have himself pop out. Next. Dragon's Den was a restaurant, and he helped his friend painting this mural, and he also painted some pictures in the menu. He simply used 2 4x8 dry plywood and painted like a Chinese ink painting. And you can see this family of monkeys, but it has a very gentle, soft, family love mood. So his painting always has this different mood, as you will see. Next. This is a signed print by Mark Davis and Tyrus Wong. Mark was the one who did the animals, and Wong did the background. And you can see the animals pop out as the video and Karen was talking about. And that's what made the Bambi movie really worked well, with the animals popping out. Next. 2 examples of Bambi scenes. On the left, you can see a very cool color with this light in the center with circles around, and give us the sense, the curiosity of Bambi. And then the light also gives us a trace of where the depth of this trail is. So it really gives us a sense of this very deep forest. On the right, we have very hot red color, this fire, and the deer is with almost silhouette with the tree trunks. You can really see the contrast of the 2 paintings. One is very cool, very calm. One is terrifying, fire coming. So you can see the different moods. Next. Here is one for a movie. This is for the Warner Brothers. It's a pre-production illustration. It's about this ice palace. It's at the edge of a gorge. We can see this very icy mountain with a chilling wind blowing through. And the people, there are actually 2 people on the lower part. It's being, one person is rescuing another person. So you can sense in this very terrible icy weather, but people are working together, try to rescue another friend. Next. This is another movie scene from The Wild Bunch. We can really see the movement. He captured the moment of all these chaotic, wild gunfighting scene. So to me, this is a very, very dynamic. You feel like this Wild West is really going on. Next. This is a different one. This is a Christmas card. With this sharp or very bright pink color, which is unusual. Tyrus usually had more muted color, but this one really pops. And probably because the shipper just noticed the star on the upper right. And in fact, this greeting card was from 1954, and this card sold more than 1 million copies. Can you believe that? People used to buy a lot of greeting cards, and Tyrus was the most popular greeting card artist for a period of time. I think it was from like 1950s to 1970s. He was really the leading greeting card artist and published for Hallmark and many other art companies. And in many years, his designs were bestsellers. I guess next. The one on the left is kind of opposite from the one we saw earlier. This is all vertical. It's still the shepherd, but maybe they have known the stories and then they're traveling around. Very calm. The one on the right is also very calm, like peaceful time. People are waiting for Christmas to come. One thing I want to mention, Tyrus Wong lived through depression, but he needed extra income. But his greeting cards were particularly meaningful to him because they were, according to him, completely my own brain, my creativity. He didn't need to please other people's ideas. So greeting cards were his, I guess, his most creative, most treasured work of art from him. Next, I want to show a few more. The one on the left, you can see sort of empty space on the left, and there's a quiet feeling. There's footsteps going to the mailbox and the bird on the upper left, so we can feel the snowy, calm environment. And then on the right is this angel. Is she picking up flowers or picking up stars? It's your own imagination. Next. So there are more cards. This one looks like a woodblock print, very simple, solid colors. This is actually a cover of a retail display album. In the old days, when they show Christmas cards, they have this almost publicity for their artist of the year. And this one was from California artists, but later they were Hallmark cards. They also put out these, what they call the display album to publicize who the artist of the year was. And Tyrus Wong was the artist of the year for many years. Next. Here we go to framed art. You can see there's picture frames. On the left is a very Chinese ink painting. It's almost like 齐白石. So it's a vegetable. We see the bok choy and a pea pot. Very simple, very little color, but you could feel this just very fluent lines. And then on the right is another shepherd art. But the mountains look very Chinese. There are many typical Chinese vertical scrolls. You will see the mountains just spike into the sky, like a famous Huangshan. So he definitely adopted Chinese art in many of his works of art. Next. This one is a boy playing yo-yo. It's acrylic. Most of his art were watercolor, whether it's transparent or opaque. This one is acrylic, and he painted on some kind of hardboard again. And there's a sense of loneliness. This little boy is playing yo-yo by himself. There are no other animals or people around him. So you can sense this maybe alienation or loneliness. Next. Here is our Reader's Digest covers. He painted many works of art for Reader's Digest. Some are covers, some are inside. And the one on the left, you can see this fisherman in this very deep wood with majestic trees. He actually said, I used to go fishing a lot. And this is his final Reader's Digest cover in 1977. And then the one in the middle is another cover, the haunted house. You could see that dark color, the cloud, the thunder, menacing weather, and maybe something frightful is coming. So, as I said, there's always a mood in his art you can sense. The one on the right, a monkey playing with his little toy, maybe some kind of insect. And it kind of gives you a sense of this idleness, this pleasure of having something you don't have to do. You just sit there and play with a little toy. Next. This is his later art. It's actually a Google Noodle. It was publicized or broadcast in CNN. It's really more like a cartoon. This little boy is playing with the kite he created or he made. This is very different from his earlier art. This is my guess. Maybe as he got older, he went to his second childhood, so he was doing kites. Maybe he was playing with his grandkids. You can sense a very different style. Next. This is again about kite. This boy flying kite. The full painting is large. You can see on the upper. I don't have a high resolution one, so it's very it's hard to see. But on the right, they turned it into a cover of this book, Water to Paper, Paint to Sky. It was actually a catalog for the retrospective exhibition in 2014 that the Walt Disney Family Museum put it up for Tyrus Wong. Finally, he was really recognized as a legend and got his own retrospective exhibition. Next. I showed this in the end. As an old man, he is flying his kite. And I quoted his words from this catalog. I love art. I learn if you put down just what's necessary to make a point, you will have a great painting. If you can do a painting with 5 strokes instead of 10, you can make your painting sing. He was an artist of minimum brushwork to give you the most feeling and emotion. He has so many more artwork. I just wanted to show some examples to complement Karen's presentation. Tyrus definitely blended East and West cultures. So that's his style. His cards and his extraordinary reach illustrate the opportunities that minority and marginalized artists might have found in commercial art. So we can really celebrate his life. I think that's the end. Next. Comments, questions for Karen, and I just wanted to put some of the pictures there.
Yeah.
I have one first question. Can you buy Tyrus Wong's Christmas cards today?
Yeah. Can I just also clarify the Google Doodle was made in honor of Tyrus. Google reached out to a young animator who was influenced by Tyrus and did that in his honor in 2018. So it wasn't made.
So it's
it
not
wasn't
actually done by Tyrus. Yeah.
No. It was commissioned by Google, who reached out to a young Chinese American animator to do that in honor of his legacy.
Yeah. Well, this has been, I want to thank you, Lily. This has been actually a wonderful presentation so far, with Karen chatting about this interesting little piece, literally a chapter, I guess, in her book, as well as a chapter in his life, and the Tijuana story, and then Lily showing us an example of his art from independent paintings to Hallmark greeting cards to work for animators. And so it reminds me of the 1600s Baroque French artist Claude Lorraine, who said, "I'll sell you my landscapes and I'll throw in the figures for free." Which because he loved to do the background landscapes, and so it sounds like he was a French Tyrus Wong. Um, at this point, I'm going to uh, ask Lily and Karen if they have thoughts. And otherwise, after that, I'm going to ask Kathy regarding comments in the chat boxes. But Karen, this was very cool. We want to thank you for being here.
Thank you. I tell everyone, I was telling the Wong family the many years that I was working on the book, like what a privilege it was to work and how inspiring it was, and what an honor it was to get to know Tyrus, to essentially live with Tyrus's story and his life for so long. And it was absolutely the best project of my career. And I just feel it was such a gift to learn so much about his life and to have the model of his life to live by for my life now. So
did you actually meet him before he passed away?
Sorry?
Did you meet him before he passed away?
No, unfortunately, like I am, like many people became deeply interested in Tyrus in 2016 when he passed away because there was so much coverage of him. But because I'm a film scholar, I realized I had run across his name a lot in histories of animation, histories of Chinese in Hollywood, and then Pamela Tom's documentary. I know there's a question in the chat about it. The documentary came out when he was 105, right before he passed in 2015, and so that spurred like the sort of recovery of interest in him. And then when he did pass in 2016, I just, like many people, I thought in addition to the documentary, there really needs to be a scholarly work documenting his entire career, because the documentary, for reasons of time, can only really focus on the Disney and the immigration story. But of course he did all of these other things. Like we didn't even talk about the WPA. So before he's with Disney, he's one of the youngest artists with the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, which is Roosevelt's, Depression era artwork, and he does really important work with that. And the history of what he does with the WPA and the ways in which like different races and different immigrants are, welcomed or not welcomed in the WPA is itself a fascinating American story. So, and then the greeting cards were, to me, always one of the most fascinating parts of the story. And really, like, I did a lot of research on the greeting cards that had never been done before. And so, for me, as a visual culture scholar, I had a research question, like, what is the unifying theme through his entire artistic production, right? When you work in animation and live action, fine and commercial art, decorative art and illustration, right? Eastern and Western aesthetics, right? There's so much coverage there, right? Like, what is the unifying theme between all of those artistic practices, right? And then of course, if you live to 106, that's the story of America. It's a century of American history, but told through a particular lens. And so, it was so important to me as a scholar to tell the entirety of his life and his career. But as a human being, it was an incredible honor and a privilege to get to know his life as intimately as I did.
And very cool. And we can all be part of it through your book, Background Artist. Carolyn Shin, who is not on the call anymore, but she was the person earlier this morning who was the ambassador from the Chinese Cultural Center, San Diego State University, spoke for a couple minutes. She had talked with me a couple of days ago, and so she sent me she texted me a little photo of herself and Tyrus Wong from 2015 at a banquet, and there he was, this 105-year-old guy who looked like $1 million actually, at age 105, and Carolyn had been to a dinner with him and took his picture. which was very cool. And she found it also to send it to me. So very cool. Kathy, should I ask you if you have any questions? I do want to point out that someone in the chat room did mention that on the Etsy website, you can purchase Tyrus Wong greeting cards.
That's actually Kim who posted that. So Tyrus's youngest daughter, and he's sort of the chief of the Tyrus Wong art estate, and loyal, like tireless, indefatigable sort of like maintainer of everything, Tyrus. And that's Kim who posted it. Hi, Kim. Thanks for doing that. And I'll also mention, thank you, Bob, for telling everyone about, you can get it through Amazon, you can get it through Barnes & Noble or at your local bookstore. Ask if they don't already have it, you can ask them to order it. If any of you are audiobook readers or listeners, there's also an audiobook of it, and it's read by the award-winning Chinese American narrator, Caroline McLaughlin, who also read Katie's Anime Wong biography.
I want to mention, thank you, Karen, to introduce me to Kim. So I'm communicating with Kim. I hope maybe sometime in the near future, we can have an exhibition in the Chinese Museum for Tyrus Wong's art.
Oh, wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
Best thing ever.
We'll hope it will happen.
I know. I see there's several questions in the chat. Kathy, do you want to run through them, or do you want me to just answer them?
Yeah, for sure. I'll just read them out. So Emily Chu asked, where is the majority of Tyrus's physical work located today?
So as you can imagine, when you have an artist as incredibly prolific as Tyrus, working in so many different media and industries, as I said, the majority is impossible to describe because there's just so much of it. And that's the case of any commercial artist, right? So I like to talk about like his major works, which are like the major fine art paintings, like the self-portrait and the Chinese Jesus that Lily showed. There's also the reclining nude. And these, all of the major works are in my book. But, so those are at specific locations. So the reclining nude is in private collection right now. The self-portrait is held by the Chinese American Museum of Los Angeles. The Dragon's Den paintings, the monkey murals, I believe, are at the Huntington. Chinese Jesus is being restored by the Huntington right now. So you have to know what the individual works. And then there's like the major works. And then there's like individual fine art paintings of different kinds that are also in private collection. The pre-production sketches, the Disney holds all of their pre-production sketches from when Tyrus officially joins the Bambi team. So the Wong family owns a few that were done by Tyrus on his own time before he became part of the Bambi team when he was still an in-betweener. The Warner Brothers sketches, and we didn't even get to talk about his 30 years as Warner Brothers, right? When he's at Warner Brothers, Tyrus is working on so many movies at so many different times. And a lot of those movies, like when you're doing pre-production sketches, the movie may not even be finished. Like it may go into turnaround. It never actually got shot, right? Or once they finish the movie, they just trash the pre-production stuff. It's not like Disney where everything's, proprietary material. So the Warner Brothers stuff is, some of it's in the Warner Brothers archives. Some of it, Tyrus took home. Some of that are in the hands of private collectors. Some of it is in the Academy of Motion Pictures. A lot of it is lost to time, but it's a lot because for a movie, you can imagine like how many pre-production sketches they're doing. Like there's books and books, like for the Wong family for PT 109, the JF John F. Kennedy movie. Like Tyrus took home a bunch of sketches. So there's binders of his storyboards that he's like doing like on the set, like really fast because they had to rework water sequences. So, so there's just so much stuff. And the Wong and Tyrus kept everything too. So the Wong family has a lot of stuff. And individual collectors, like, the pottery that we didn't talk about, right? People were buying his individual ceramic items. So individual collectors hold that. The greeting cards, greeting cards were commercial ephemera, right? So a lot of times they weren't kept, but, he was such a popular greeting card artist that I get letters from collectors who say, "Oh, I'm so glad to hear about this because, my mom bought like his collection every year. So I have a whole collection of his greeting cards from like 1950 to 1970 or something." There was also a really vibrant market of people buying the original sample art for the greeting cards. So if you're a greeting card artist, you make your painting or whatever, like, on a board, and then you send it to the greeting card publishers. They decide what they're going to print, and then there's still the original painting. So Tyrus's contract would allow him to retain the original painting, but then he sometimes sold those original paintings to collectors. So sometimes those paintings are in private hands. So there's, an incredible amount of Tyrus's art. There's no single place that it all is. And part of the fun is always hearing from other people about, stuff that they have from him. And I would also say, just as another instance of like how popular he was as a greeting card artist, was that there were lots of imitations and imitations and pirated editions. And so sometimes you'll see on Etsy or you'll see on eBay people trying to sell stuff that they say is Tyrus's, but it's actually not. And so Lily and I encountered this. Like Lily had found an image that she found attributed to Tyrus. And I had to say, this happened to me before in my own research. I actually had to tell Hallmark that like Hallmark sent this stuff. And I was like, yeah, I don't think this is Tyrus. And I went to Kim and we were like, no, it's not Tyrus's. So, but it's actually, it seems like a problem, but it's just a reminder, imitation is best flattery. That's how popular he was as a greeting card artist.
Yeah, Karen, I have a question. You mentioned that he was a Works Progress Administration employee, and to get his $23.80 a week, which I think was the going rate back then, he would have had to have produced stuff for schools or post offices or libraries, or what did he do for the WPA?
So he was an easel painter. So if you were appointed by the WPA Fine Arts Project Administration, like that, you could be a mural painter, you could be a sculptor, you could be like a fine art printmaker. And he also did fine art prints, and those were also really popular. But his appointment was as an easel painter. So he was painting on canvas, individual paintings. And he actually was paid, I would have to look at my records, I think it was actually like $46.50 or something, because he was considered semi-professional, which is a higher ranking artist. And so again, he was at 25, 26 at this time. He's not a citizen. He's he's not white. This is again a sign of how highly regarded he was at such a young age. But some of those easel paintings are actually the Santa Monica Museum, the Santa Monica High School Art Museum actually has a couple of his paintings. The Santa Monica Library used to have a painting that we can't find anymore. His fine art prints that he did for the WPA survive in a number of museums around the country.
And again, you would have had to have done stuff for institutions, because that was the rules of the WPA. So very interesting. So I got that 2380 fact, which may be correct, from watching old 1930s Benita Granville, Nancy Drew movies. And she would refer to that as a sideline in her dialogue.
And then I'll say to Evangeline, who had a question, this is kind of related about the physical work, the kites. So Tyrus did not, as a practice, sell the kites. It was really a labor of love for himself. He sometimes, he kept most of his kites. He did occasionally place them at museums. So Kim, do you want to put in the chat where they are? I think, isn't one at Sacramento? So Kim is saying, LACMA has recently acquired an early ink and watercolor. But where are the kites, Kim? Doesn't Sacramento have one? Oakland has
Kim,
one?
you can speak up if you wish, Kim.
Oh, Kim, I guess you can just speak.
Just unmute yourself. We're happy to hear.
Okay, so there is one butterfly kite in Sacramento at what used to be I think it's called the California Museum. It used to be the Women's Museum, I believe, in Sacramento. And we still try to fly kites when the wind is good, but it's been rare. We still try to fly in Santa Monica. but my main kite wrangler has to be available, and we still hope to fly kites again. There are some examples of kites at the Chinese American Museum in Los Angeles. I'm not sure that they're on display, but they do have some in their collection.
Thank you. Kathy, are there more questions from viewers?
There's one from Catherine. She asked, first of all, she said she loved your presentation, and then she asked, was there a PBS documentary a few years ago on Tyrus?
Yeah, and we mentioned that earlier. That was the one directed by Pamela Tom that came out in 2015 and won a bunch of awards. And actually, so it was originally made by Pamela as an independent document, as a self-contained documentary, and PBS purchased it. And we're lucky that PBS purchased it for its American Masters series, and they often replay it, particularly during May for Asian American History Month.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And Kathy?
I think that's it. And then we can open it up to the audience.
Certainly, if you folks have any questions, feel free to raise your electronic hand or actual hand or type in the chat box. We're happy to do any of those. I think this is just actually a wonderful beginning of our monthly Zooms for 2026. And we really want to thank Karen and Lily for all their hard work to have produced this. And, this has just been fun. The for those of you who aren't followers of our monthly Zoom, our topics are remarkably varied, from ceramics to immigration. We had a couple months ago, we had the director of the Shanghai Jewish Refugee Museum speak to us, and we had all these people coming out of the woodwork who were in their late 80s and 90s who had been who spent the war years in Shanghai. It was just absolutely remarkable. We have feel free. So that's cool. And next month we're going to have Lily Birmingham chat about woodblocks. So that's going to be there we are. So woodblocks next month, and then March 21st, our Dr. Sun presentation, and you're going to love Busaba Yip from Hawaii, and you're going to love Leland Sun as well, who will have all these very interesting stories, and he'll tell you when he first found out that he was related to Dr. Sun, which was not when he was 3 years old. It was when a teacher in high school told him. He had no idea, and which is a funny story in itself. If there are no other questions, we want to thank everyone for tuning in today. This has been a great presentation, and we'd like to